is episode 16. This is episode 16. I'm not sure I realized that for some reasons. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. Okay, so I got to figure out what to do, and I was gonna make sure. Yep. So, I have no what I'm gonna do, Vigily. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. If I could say Vigily. Of course. Okay, so it might be around here. It's supposed to be over there. And there. I gotta figure out what to do, and I have no idea. I was gonna get some bad ideas, if I could assume, really. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. Okay, now what to do? Oh, right. If I could assume, really. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. Vigily? Until I didn't know this. Of course. Okay. Now, I need to figure this out for some reasons. But it might be definitely. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yeah, yep. Until I figured this out for some reasons. Okay. I got a lot of things to do. Yep. And try to figure it out with them visually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep, if you can see visually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Hold on. Okay. I was getting some bad ideas. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Okay. I was gonna make sure I checked the last time for the others. But it might be good visually. Of course. I'm not sure they'll be around here for some reasons. But if I can assume visually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep, if I assume visually. Of course. I need to get some ideas. But it does, definitely. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Okay, so, I have no idea, visually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. I'm not getting this close. But I'm gonna figure it out with them. Eventually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. If I could assume I was gonna find them. But it might be, I guess. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. If I could assume, really. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. If I could assume, really. Of course. Okay. So I have no what I'm gonna do. And try to figure it out with them visually. Of course. If I can simply. Because I have no idea. Of course. Okay. I was gonna make sure where else that visually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. If I can simply. Of course. Okay. So for some reasons. It might be over there, but it might be over here. Because I don't know about that. But if I could assume it was there. But if I could assume I ate on spoon savagely. Until I didn't know this. Definitely. Until I get some ideas. Yep. Vigily. Of course. Until I didn't know this, right? If I could assume, Julie. Of course. At least I was trying to get to that. Right. Of course. For some reasons. And I have no idea, right? If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep, if I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Bye. I was gonna make sure, right? If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep.